Things had been going well for you lately, so by the law of averages, it only made good sense that things were about to go terribly wrong. You had finally made peace with yourself in terms of Kylo Ren. You were finally becoming a good shot with the blaster. You were becoming a good pilot, and Rey had obviously been impressed with your force skills enough to let you construct and create your very own lightsaber, which had its own distinctive amber hue to reflect both the darkness and the light within you. That last one was an achievement in and of itself, and you couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell in your chest every time you noticed it at your side. Annie hadn't had a tantrum in weeks, and even Ladson had come to terms with the fact that the Resistance wasn't a terrible place to be after all. You figured this had less to do with the Resistance and more to do with his developing friendship with Finn, as most days you walked in on them laughing together at the dinner table over some small joke that you weren't in on, but you were glad to see Ladson finally making friends regardless. That was why, of course, something had to go terribly, horribly wrong. You hadn't realized anything was wrong at first, and that was part of the reason you were kicking yourself so hard. You simply hadn't expected anything to happen, and it was just a minor thing, just a little slip, and you couldn't believe that you hadn't come to terms with it before. You practically lived inside your own head, constantly over-processing every little thought and detail that crossed your path, and yet this somehow escaped your thoughts and eluded your conscious recognition. You weren't even aware of it until you were walking into the hangar with Poe that morning. You had been walking beside him, amiably making small talk, when the back of your hand accidentally brushed against his. He didn't even seem to notice, but you had immediately jerked your hand away, almost striking yourself in the face as you used that hand to smooth back your hair in a seemingly inconspicuous gesture. Even though that should have been the end of it, you couldn't help but feel a slight tingling sensation along the back of your hand where he had touched you, and the more you tried not to think about it, the more you realized how many times you had accidentally brushed digits with Rey or Finn or even Ladson without overthinking it. In fact, the more you thought about it, the more you struggled to come to terms with the fact that there was a definite heat in your cheeks that you wouldn't be able to explain if he asked, and your palms were suddenly sweaty, and you were hyper aware of the way your heart was thumping in your chest. In fact, by the time you plopped into your familiar seat beside him in the cockpit, everything had changed from the moment you had first stepped outside your door that morning, and the worst part was that you couldn't even really have explained how. You had greeted him that morning with snark and sarcasm like you had every other morning. He had touched the back of your hand with his, on accident, and then suddenly the way he said your name made the hair on the back of your neck stand on end, and you felt a weird churning sensation in your stomach as you turned to look at him, as if you were guilty of some crime you didn't know you had committed. You turned to the console in front of you with a new mantra playing in your head. The first time you sat in this cockpit, you had been saying something along the lines of, "Don't crash, don't crash, don't crash." Now it was something even more worrisome. You don't have a crush on Poe Dameron. You don't have a crush on Poe Dameron. You don't have a crush on Poe Dameron. You don't... Shit. It was ridiculous to even think about, really, because you had always felt that you belonged to Kylo Ren. You had resolved to stay loyal and faithful to him, even though you had never spoken about it, just because you knew that you were his and he was yours, and it wasn't even something that you had to bother having a discussion about. But now so much had changed. Could you really be with him anymore after all he had done? That was a conversation you had already had with yourself, and you had already decided that you weren't dwelling on it anymore. He hadn't seen you in years, and for all intents and purposes, you were not together now. You should be able to feel free to at least look at other guys. But you couldn't. Whether you liked it or not, a small part of yourself truly wanted to remain faithful to Kylo, and you couldn't fight against it. There's also Annie to think about. What guy would want to get involved with a person who was the willing parent of Kylo Ren's offspring? That itself screamed issues. And then there was also the matter of your friendship. What if you made a move and he rejected you and then felt so uncomfortable around you that he didn't want to teach you anymore? What if he stopped coming around at dinner time to avoid you, and then Ray and Finn would start keeping away from you as well? You knew it was ridiculously dramatic to think about, but you hadn't actually been with anyone besides Kylo Ren for almost 8 years now, and even before that, you had only been involved in a series of flings and affairs that hadn't been all that serious. No, you wouldn't even know how to properly date someone if you tried, especially not in the middle of active wartime, in the middle of a military installation. There was a time and a place, and this was neither, although you still had to remind yourself to be kind to yourself. It was not that odd for you to be attracted to Poe. He was good looking, for starters, and he also had this confident, cocky swagger about him that immediately put you at ease whenever you were with him. He had many attractive qualities, and so there was nothing inherently wrong with being attracted to him, especially when no one had intimately touched you in years. It was totally normal for you to crave human connection, but you couldn't allow yourself to do anything about it now. So when Poe turned to you and asked if you were good for takeoff, you told him you were golden. Pressing the comlink button, you go through the now familiar departure procedure. Control, this is Moonstaff requesting launch clearance for aspiration along approach Bravo for tactical maneuvers in accordance with flight plan. Moonstaff, Control, I copy. Your flight plan has been approved with modifications. Liberty on station and Captain Antilles has been notified of your maneuvers. Modifications, you think to yourself? You and Poe had made a very simple flight plan yesterday. How could it have been modified? Control, hold. Captain Antilles, modifications? Yes, Captain Antilles. Commander Dameron will explain during your ascent. You're cleared for taxi, Moonstaff. You turn to Poe, who just throws back his head and laughs while you glare at him incredulously, biting your lip as you shake your head from side to side as you finish the launch preparations, releasing the inertial lock and slowly guiding the Corvette to the center of the hangar. You hovered over the thruster controls, anxiously waiting for the blast deck to clear and the controller to give you the go-ahead. Moonstaff, you're cleared for launch. You eased the thrusters up, waiting until you had cleared the main hangar doors before engaging the engines to full power and setting the autopilot to fly you to the maneuvering area. Once the autopilot finished its brief setup and took over, you turned to Poe. So, you going to explain what that was all about, or you just want to make me look like an idiot some more? Poe just winks at you good-naturedly. First of all, you couldn't make yourself look like an idiot even if you tried. And secondly, he turns to face you. Yesterday, the Republic fleet sighted a First Order scout ship exit hyperspace near Naboo and then jump before they could detain it. As a precaution, fleet defenses have been ordered to battle stations around Dakar, even though the threat is minimal. See? He points out the cockpit windows as the two X-Wings that have taken up positions on either side of you, and you see both pilots briefly salute Poe before racing ahead of you and breaking away into a dramatic crossed loop, passing in front of you. Porter and Cad, Poe laughs as he shakes his head. Always showing off when they can. Anyway, Captain Antilles commands the Liberty, and he's agreed to let us run our training exercises near his ship on the condition that I help him with a little training of his own. Today, you're still going to learn about evasive actions, should you ever be attacked by pirates or other malcontents in the depths of space, but who better to practice with than the galaxy's best starfighter pilots? As if on cue, the comlink activated, and you noted it was not the standard voice broadcast channel you were used to, but a military holographic frequency. You press the comlink button to open the connection, and to the side of the cockpit, the small glowing holographic figure of an older man in the officer uniform of the Republic Navy appeared and waved to you. He says your name inquisitively, and you nod your head in affirmation, assuming that this must be Captain Antilles. I'm Captain Antilles, but you can just call me Wedge. I'm the captain of the Liberty, that calamari cruiser up ahead. Looking out the windows, you spot it among a dozen other large ships near the edge of the asteroid ring. You had seen ships of all kinds of design during your days on the trading vessel, but never one quite like this, dominated by curves instead of the edges and corners so common to military battleships. Poe, he asks, you fill her in on the plan yet? Just getting to that part, Poe replies smoothly. Fair enough, Wedge replies as he turns back to you. Normally for something like this, I would arrange a full briefing the night before, but I don't know how long we'll be here, so we arranged this somewhat last minute this morning. I have some new pilots in our fighter squadron who could use some training in intercepting a ship piloted by someone unpredictable, not trained by the Republic. Poe proposed intersecting our training objectives, teaching you evasion action against fighter crews while Black Squadron led my pilots in interception exercises. Once you make the rendezvous distance, Poe will take over from there. He turns back to Poe, and if I don't get the chance, give my regards to Leia for me. Will do, Poe says as the hologram fades, and you turn to face him. Did he just call you Poe? You ask him, and Poe chuckles as he shakes his head. Nice to see you're paying attention, Poe says, and you stick your tongue out at him. Hey, you say as you shake your head. I know the Resistance is different, but since he's Republic, don't you guys call each other Captain and Commander and the like? Normally, yes, Poe explains, but Wedge was one of my mentors and the other reason I became a fighter pilot. He was one of the Alliance's best pilots, and he was instrumental in the destruction of the Empire's second Death Star. He knew a lot about every class of ship, so when the Republic fleet was crippled at Hosnian, Wedge came out of retirement and volunteered to serve as provisional captain on an old Alliance ship while the Republic rebuilt. We look out for each other, so when he contacted me a couple of hours ago about the pilots, I made a last-minute change to the lesson plan. Speaking of... He pulls out a small wrist comm link and straps it on, doing a communications check. Black Squadron, this is Black Leader. Do you read me? Black 2 here. We read you loud and clear, Black Leader. Ready to break in the new guys whenever you are. Alright, wait for my signal. Still finishing the ready briefing here. Roger, Black Leader. Over and out. Poe turns back to you. Since we're going to the fleet instead of our original maneuvering point, you can cancel the autopilot and head over to the Liberty. Once you get within a few kilometers, we can begin the fun. Since the guys obviously can't actually shoot at us, this will be simulated, but you'll know when their targeting computer has locked on. When they do, the screens will flash red and the virtual shield integrity will start to go down. Your entire goal is to shake the fighters tailing you and keep shields from falling. Their job is to wear down the shields until they can fire an ion shot to stop the ship. If you lose them, we win the round. If they kill the shields, they win the round. Best of 5 rounds wins the exercise. As you near Liberty, you could bring the Corvette up in short, awed by how it seems to dwarf your ship. Porter bragged that he'd net the first round easy since the Corvette is so slow compared to an X-Wing, but we have a trick up our sleeves, Poe grins and points to a lever under your seat, as he previously mentioned was only used in rare emergencies. That's emergency power. It consumes fuel at a much faster rate and coax the thrusters, but it means we can fly almost like a starfighter for an hour or two before we have to head back down and clean the engines. If you were flying a ship like this, it would let you outrun just about anything waiting out there for you. Pull it out and let's get started. The guys are never going to expect this. I like the way you think, you say, leaning over to give him a high five. He intertwines his fingers around yours and gives your hand a quick squeeze as you bite your lip, unable to suppress your grin. Strap in, you warn. I've got a few ideas already. He picks up his wrist comlink again. Nova Detail, Black Squadron, this is Black Leader. Begin your attack on my mark. He looks at you quickly as he leans in and drops his voice down to a whisper. Take off and dive behind the Liberty before I get to 0. The Liberty has ion-blocking shields, so we'll briefly be invisible to get the upper hand. You press your teeth against your knuckle to suppress your laughter, and you could feel a blush rising to your cheeks as you nod your head. He was such a little shit, and to be honest, you kinda loved it. He turns back to the comlink. Porter, you're Nova Leader for this round, as promised. When she wins this round, don't forget, we had a bet and I'll expect full payment by tomorrow night. Nova 2 and 3, are you ready? Nova 2, standing by. Nova 3, standing by. All right, begin exercise in 3, 2, 1. You push the engine suddenly to full power, pulling the ship up in a twisting loop, up and over the top of the Liberty before flipping the ship and pulling it around behind it, noting that the ship was at least 4 times faster than usual. As you came around the underside of the cruiser, your screen suddenly lit up with weapons targeting alarms as Porter and the 2 new pilots attempt to predict your movements and line up for shots. Inspired, you continue circling around the Liberty for another pass, pulling up on the other side to make a quick dash to the rear of the ship, counting on the exhaust of the huge engines there to cloak your next move. Instead of just losing Porter and the other 2, you were going to turn the tables. For a minute, you forgot that this whole thing was a simulation. The adrenaline was making your fingertips itch, and you were so focused on getting this right, on completing this perfectly, desperate and anxious not to let Poe down. As you reach the engines, you think you can sense Porter on the other side of the ship, waiting to intercept you when you pass under the Liberty. As you cut across the engines, you see him diving to the cruiser's underside in an attempt to intercept you and bank hard to catch up with him. As he pulls up to emptiness where he had expected the aspiration to be, you see him briefly level off as if to search for you, and you slip in behind you. If you had weapons, it would have been a perfect shot. Poe cheers and whoops as he raises his wrist to speak into the comlink. Pew pew, and against all odds, Moonstaff scores a kill. Told you it'd happen, Porter. I'll expect payment in full by tomorrow night. You hear Porter grumble something back about beginner's luck and Ray's trickery. What can I say? It was a clean kill, and it was all her. You blush as you look away. Take note, Nova 2 and 3, the high ion content of engine wakes makes them a very effective method of briefly hiding from tracking scopes. Cad, get ready for round 2. As he lowers his watch, you turn back to him, a bit incredulous. You really bet on me? Of course I did, Poe says, as if he's surprised. You know what you're doing. I have total confidence in you. You know that. Over the next 3 rounds, you manage to lose all 3 fighters long enough for a hyperspace jump only once, tying the exercise at 2-2. On the 5th round, just as you were about to reach the 15-second mark necessary for a jump, Nova 2 managed to get one last shot in, reducing your shield to 0 and taking the round. And secure exercise, Poe says, never once letting his signature grin slip from his face. Nice job, Nova 2. Looks like the next drink is on me. And Porter, I still expect you to make good on that bet. In the meantime, we have to head back and clean up these engines for the next time. Black Leader, over and out. You shake your head in disbelief. He was so incredibly buoyant, even in defeat, and you didn't know how he managed it. He nods back to the plant below, and you turn the Corvette towards Dakar. With flying like that, I think I'd be afraid to be a pirate attacking you in the depths of space, Poe says teasingly, and you roll your eyes. Please, like I'd have stood a chance if there was anyone else teaching me, you say as you shrug your shoulders. No, Poe says as he shakes his head. I'm not taking credit for this. That flying was all you. You just grin good-naturedly as you get closer to Dakar, and you can't help but notice a glow around the western rim of the planet that you had never seen before, almost as if there were multicolored ripples covering the planet's right side. What's that? You ask as you tilt your head to the side. The ripples? Poe asks as he sits back in his chair. Those are low-level auroras that form on the edge of the atmosphere due to the metallic cloud interacting with the sun's radiation. As the charged particles from the star collide with the metal particles, something about the way they interact makes them suddenly glow with color, and the effect is even better whenever the sun gives off a coronal ejection. Come to think of it, Control did mention they were expecting one within the next few weeks. The aurora by itself isn't all that impressive on its own, though, not without what happens at sunset. During sunset, the metallic cloud has an amplifying effect on the particle radiation, and the aurora reaches its brightest cycling through all the colors of the spectrum. In addition, the metal acts as a weak reflector, filling the entire western sky with color and stretching it all the way to the other horizon, until the whole sky is filled with red and orange and purple, all while the overhead aurora is clearly visible through it all, horizon to horizon. Cool, you murmur, only understanding about half of what he was saying. It's amazing, he tells you, watching the sky light up with color like that. He arches an eyebrow at you. Oh, come on, you mean to tell me you've never seen a sunset before? Not on my home planet, you explain with a small shrug. I mean, sure, I've probably seen one at some point, but it gets dark pretty quickly where I'm from, and it certainly doesn't sound as cool as what you're describing. Poe just shakes his head as if he's disappointed by your lack of enthusiasm. You haven't lived until you've seen a sunset on Dakar, he says, undeterred. If you want, I'll show it to you sometime. Sure, you reply immediately. Sounds like fun. He glances at you for a moment before he turns back to his console, and that's when you realize that you may have just gravely misinterpreted the question as you replay the words back in your head. When he had first suggested the invite, you had at first thought it was a group thing, like, we'll all go see the sunset together sometime. But no, he said he wanted to show it to you. Specifically. Maybe he meant a general you? Why did basic have to be so complicated? You don't know, or you don't really want to ask if it's a group thing or not. Not sure how to feel about the answer, and against your better judgment, you decide to swing the conversation in another direction. Leia told me about the offensive strike that the Resistance is planning against the First Order. He casts a weary look in your direction and says nothing. I'm guessing that means aerial combat, right? He turns his head to the side to regard you, not keeping anything from you, but not giving you much more than you really needed to know. You'd be guessing, right? You just nod your head a few times and shrug, turning to look back through the glass in front of you. You could immediately tell from his tone that he wasn't comfortable talking about military strategy with you, and you regretted bringing it up at all. You knew you shouldn't have, but just 1 minute ago, you were desperate to do anything to stop thinking about his invitation to see the sunset with you. I was just asking because, well, as the commander, you'll be going with them, right? You ask nervously. He raises his eyebrows in surprise, but nods his head in the affirmative. I was just asking because if you are, I just wanted to tell you to, stay safe. Stay safe. A smile tugs at the corners of his lips, and you quickly blush as you look away again. Be careful, you say, emphasizing the last word. If you go and get yourself shot down, then there won't be anyone left to teach me how to be a pilot. Not going to happen, Poe says confidently. And in any case, I wouldn't worry too much about that. You've been doing great over these past few weeks. Pretty soon you won't even need me anymore. Your mouth drops open and you quickly bite your lip and avert your eyes in an attempt to recover yourself. Don't worry, Poe says as he notices your expression. I'm not going anywhere just yet. Good, you reply curtly, because knowing me, I'd probably just drop out of the sky and crash the ship. Not a chance, Poe says, drawing out the last syllable. You have too much confidence in me, you tell him, and idly you can't help but wonder if that was the whole problem. Finn had confidence in your skills with the blaster, but then again, you had the Force. You were naturally inclined to be good with one. Rey had confidence in your skills in the Force, but you had been training for years before you had even met her. But you had never piloted a ship before, and the only instruction you had ever gotten was from Poe himself. If he was confident in you, it was because he was confident in you and your natural abilities alone, no Force involved. You make idle small talk with Poe as you land and head back to your room together. You had just opened up the door when Annie came running out, brandishing your old staff in front of him. You had adjusted the height on it, so now it was automatically set to Annie's height whenever he pushed the little button. You gave that to him? Paul asks incredulously as Annie swings the staff around. He's got to learn sometime, you say simply as he smashes it into a wall. or he'll break it, and then it won't matter either way. Come on. Poe picks up Annie and holds him up in front of him. Hey, little man, you like hitting things? Yes, Annie says loudly, and you let out a good-natured snort as Poe turns to you. Mind if I take him for a little while? Poe asks. I think I got something fun to show him. You hesitate for a moment as Latson appears in the doorway. Oh, is this that thing Finn was talking about yesterday? Latson asks, and Poe just nods his head. Sure thing then. I'll be here. Just bring him back when he gets to be too much to handle. Oh, I don't think he'll be a problem, Poe says as he readjusts Annie in his arms. Wave goodbye to Mommy, huh, Annie? Annie just waves his little hand back and forth excitedly, and you can't help but smile as you watch him carry Annie off. He loves that little BB-8 droid now, Latson tells you as they disappear around a corner. Huh? You can tell he's watching your expression closely, and you quickly shake your head as you disappear inside and shut the door behind you. Oh, right, Poe's little droid. I think it's forgiven me for threatening to turn it into scrap. That's good, Latson says. And what about Poe? Has he forgiven you for knocking him out? You laugh as you turn to face him, crinkling up your nose. I mean, he's forgiven me for that a while ago, if he was ever really mad about it to begin with. You tilt your head to the side. Why? Nothing, Latson says softly, holding up his hands innocently, and you march towards him, standing directly in front of him. Tell me. No. Tell me. Mm-mm. You make a move to punch him, but he grabs your wrist and holds it out at an uncomfortable angle. You quickly bring up your leg to sweep out from under his knee, and he stumbles backwards on the couch, releasing you instantly. No sparring right now, Latson says, holding up his hands. Please, I still haven't recovered from the last trouncing you gave me. Well, someone has to do it, you say teasingly. It's okay if you like him, Latson says at length, and your face drops. I don't like him, you say testily, crossing your arms over your chest like a petulant child. It's okay if you do, Latson repeats firmly. I mean, he's nice, he's good-looking, he's funny, he's good with Annie. If he's so amazing, why don't you date him? You snort. Because I'm not interested in him, Latson tells you, and your eyes widen as a grin splits across your face. You found somebody, you say excitedly, clapping both of your hands together. Tell me who it is. No. Tell me. No. You tilt your head to the side and laugh. Didn't we just have this conversation? Latson purses his lips. Fine, I'll tell you who it is, if you at least make a move on Poe. Not a chance, you laugh. You know I belong to Kylo Ren. The words are out of your mouth before you can stop them, and you quickly put both hands over your mouth to stop yourself from saying anything else. But it's already too late. The damage has already been done. Luckily, Latson is in too good of a mood right now to give you hell about it. He simply clasps both hands together and presses his index fingers together as he points them in your direction. Brainwashed. I'm not brainwashed, you insist, covering your ears with your hands. Brainwashed, he repeats in a sing-song voice. Not brainwashed, you say firmly as you lower your hands to your sides. Seriously, not brainwashed. I had come to accept that Kylo and I really did have feelings for each other, even if he was ordered to be nice to me. Somewhere along the line, we did actually fall for each other, and he really did send me away for my safety. But that's who he was, and that's not who he is now, and I don't belong to anybody because I am my own person. Latson just looks amused as he runs the edge of his thumb against his lower lip. And you came up with that just now, did you? That's what I'm trying to tell myself, you tell him. Not just because it's the healthiest thing for me to believe, but because it's true. The more I think about it, the more I think he really did genuinely love me. I was in his head. I felt his emotions. I don't think those were fake, but, Latson asks, goading you on. But I don't think he feels that way anymore, you admit. And he's not here. And while I still feel connected to him, I have to realize the chances of me ever seeing him again are slim to none, and I've got to keep moving on with my life. By fucking that pilot, Letson says resolutely, and your face turns bright red. No, I mean, it makes sense. Kylo Ren was sort of the unofficial commander of the First Order, right? And I mean, Poe is the commander of the Starfighter Corps, so... Shut up, you say hotly. Don't compare them. And besides, Captain Phasma was the commander of the First Order. No, she was a captain, Ladson informs you, but you just shake your head. Captain, commander, general. They were all just military titles that didn't really mean anything to you. You had never really wanted to be involved in this war in the first place. You had never really wanted to get involved with the skirmish in any way, and yet here you were. Again. If you got involved with a commander of anything, then you could be sure that your life would never be free of this military intervention. It doesn't matter, you tell him. We're two different people. Poe's life is here with the Resistance, and I've never wanted anything to do with the military in any way. That's exactly what you said about Kylo Ren, Ladson points out, but then you wanted to stay on the Starkiller base with him regardless. But that was different, you argue, because you're starting to realize now that it really wasn't. Damn you, you're too smart for your own good. Not smart, Ladson says, shaking his head. I just know you, better than you know yourself, which actually makes sense, in a way, considering this way I can be more objective about you. You hesitate for a moment and gesture for him to continue. You had thought that Rey would be able to give you more insight after seeing inside your head, but Ladson had at least experienced life on the Starkiller base with you and had lived with you for years. You loved Kylo Ren, Ladson tells you, and you would have done anything for him, and so you're hurt that he doesn't feel the same way back. You start to talk, and he holds up a hand to stop you. If the position was reversed, you would have come back and picked him up immediately, regardless of the risk, and you're hurt that he didn't do the same. You're hurt that he's running around the galaxy doing all of these things, living his own life, while you were stuck at home waiting for him. And I'm sure you've already imagined plenty of opportunities when he could have come back to you between Rey's visions, right? You nod your head slowly. Things on the Starkiller base weren't as bad for me as they could have been, Ladson says softly. I learned how to fight, and I learned how to be a pilot, and that was because Kylo Ren cared for you enough that he wanted someone you trusted to protect you. Remember the first night he came to our house? He told me I didn't have to be a stormtrooper and follow his orders anymore, because that was what you wanted, even though it didn't serve him. If Kylo Ren cared about what you wanted more than what he wanted, it meant he genuinely cared for you. He saved Sadie, you say quietly. But then again, he's killed so many more people since then. He's hurt so many more people. But that has nothing to do with you, Ladson says firmly. Like you told me before, Rey wanted you to keep an open mind and not be influenced by her feelings because she doesn't want you to be afraid of him just because she is. Rey's not afraid of him, you say immediately. She despises him. But she was afraid at first, Ladson corrects himself. And you're right. Now she despises him. So should you despise him on that principle alone then? No, but what? Ladson asks, and you just shrug your shoulders uncomfortably. I don't understand the Force, or the Force bond that you have with him, so I'm not going to count that. But I do know a thing or two about mind games and manipulation, and I know that looking back on the past, especially when you keep replaying it over and over in your mind, can distort your perception of what really happened. He takes a deep breath in and lets it out. But you need to be honest with yourself and what you want. You need to take a deep breath and say, yes, I love Kylo, and I still do, but I can't be with him anymore, and I'm going to try to move on in whatever form that takes. Or, you ask hesitantly, or you can spend the rest of your life waiting around for him, Ladson says with a shrug. You've done it for the past 5 years. I'm sure you can do it for the next 10, or 20, or 30. I don't want to wait that long, you say with a laugh, but Ladson doesn't look like he's joking. It's up to you, he says firmly. When we stepped foot on the Starkiller base, we didn't know what would happen there, and we don't know where we'll be in a month from now, or even a year from now. Heck, we could be back at home with Sadie and Annie, laughing about this whole thing for all we know. Seems doubtful, you reply, reflecting a sober demeanor. The point is that you don't know, Ladson says firmly. Stop trying to figure it all out. Stop trying to find all the answers. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to be unsure, but stop letting it consume your whole life. Stop looking towards the future and start living in the now. You take his hand in yours as you intertwine your fingers together. Since when did you become so smart? If I had known you were going to give me a speech like this, I would have come to you first instead of Ray. I've been here, Ladson insists, although there is a good note of humor in his voice. You just haven't been listening. Well, I'm listening now, you tell him. So thank you for that. And for Annie. And for everything, I guess. He just smiles as he gives your hand a little squeeze. You're welcome. You let the moments just tick by as you sit together in comfortable silence. So, does that mean you're going to fuck that pilot now? Because... Shut up.